Clanfolk is a new colony sim game developed by Hooded Horse, and it's currently in access on Steam for like 18 quid. They were kind enough to send me over a code and I've been absolutely obsessed with it ever since. I've spent like 20 hours on this over the weekend, trying out different methods to try and get my clan to survive the winter. It's unbelievably brutal. Your clan will start to run out of food, they'll start getting depressed, they'll get freezing, and then they'll start dying, which will mean there's less people to work, and eventually the entire clan completely collapses, everybody dies, and you have to start from scratch. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make sure that doesn't happen to you. Since this game's still in early access, not all systems are that intuitive, and there's some weird little oddities with it that you can take advantage of to make sure your clan survives and see everything this game has to offer. So this is how I set up my world. You can use my seed and my settings if you want to, it's entirely up to you. When you get the map created, what I'm really looking for is one of these little pools of water, a big lake, and then a mountain that I can build my base into. So just keep on clicking new map and changing the seed until you get something that looks a little bit like that. Then when you're creating a clan, just have a look at the skills that go along with each one. You want to make sure the skills that make them unhappy aren't really important skills. They're not all the same. Like if you've got one person who doesn't like mining, that's fine, but you don't want all of them to have that. Then once you're ready, start the game. When you start the game, I'd pause, just find where you want to build a base. So I found some iron, a little pool, a lake, and a mountain, loads of trees. That's pretty much everything you need, so you can just get started. The tutorial for this game is really good, so just follow that and it'll show you how to kind of get set up for the very beginning. One thing to note is that water doesn't really get polluted or anything like that. So you can put drinking water next to washing water and you can put your eel traps in there, and that's all absolutely fine. Now, one thing you do need to do is to start organizing your skills. So if you click on the skills button at the bottom, you'll see this kind of tree, and what you want to do is pretty simply put all of the things that makes people sad down to the bottom so they won't get prioritized to do those tasks. Put the things that make them happy near the top. I also tend to put medicine near the top just because it means if someone gets injured, then they'll definitely go help them. They'll prioritize that over everything else. And then also the multipliers on some skills show you that they will learn that skill quicker. So it makes sense to try and put those near the top as well. Other than that, you just want to make sure there's a decent spread. So make sure every skill is represented somewhere near the top of the skill tree, just so there'll always be someone who's willing to do every job and jobs won't get left forever. Really don't forget things like cleaning and hauling. They're the really simple things that often people will not prioritize over anything else. The game does tell you this, but it's super important to remember. When you start building fires, you get your first cooking fire. The red circle around it is where sparks are going to be thrown. If anything flammable is left there or put there, like you put it next to a straw wall or something like that, it will set on fire pretty quickly. So just always make sure there's nothing around there, and you can actually use a blocking area a little while after you build your first fire that will stop people from dropping stuff in there. Now, I would start trying to build your first shelter on your first day if you can. You might not have enough straw to be able to do it, but I would just build everything out of straw. And actually, all the way through this, I build nearly everything out of straw first time because it's super cheap, it's really easy to get. You can just harvest reeds from around the lake bed, or you can harvest the different types of grass and then fresh them. But try to get that building done as quickly as possible because you want shelter for your clan to be able to sleep in. That'll put them in a better mood, and it means that they will work harder and faster. It's also worth noting that straw is absolutely fine near fires as long as the fire's circle isn't touching it. Straw roofs won't catch on fire just because there's a fire below them. It doesn't work like that at all, so don't worry. As long as the fires have that sort of circle clear, it will be absolutely fine. If you go into the farming crafting menu, you can also make animal beds, and you can just put them in the same places as where your clan are going to sleep. It being messy, having a dirt floor, straw things, animals in, doesn't really affect them that much, so it's easier just to keep things together, and they generate a little bit of warmth. Now I'm starting to make the base a little bit bigger. You want to make that small base just to give them somewhere to sleep as quickly as you can, but then once you've got a little bit more time, once things are a bit more settled down, you can start building it into what you want it to be eventually. And I want to build into this mountain, partly just because it automatically gives you a load of roofs and floors and walls that you can then use, so it saves you a lot on materials and time spent sort of crafting things and gathering things. So I've put all of the Clanfolk beds on one left side where the fire is as as well, but there's enough space around the fire that while it will keep them warm, it's not going to set anything on fire, and I've also put that blocking area around it. Then where the beds used to be, I've kept the animal beds in there, but I've also put a load of mushroom drying racks. Once you've gathered enough mushrooms, you'll be able to pick these up, and then it means that you'll be able to start drying any mushrooms you find. You won't probably find that many in summer. In fall is when they really start growing very, very quickly, but you want to start building up your supply of dried mushrooms as quickly as possible. Once you've got things a bit settled, you can start moving things around, and this game makes it super easy to move stuff around, so don't worry about putting stuff in the wrong place at first. But you want to put the heat source in a different room to where the beds are, and that's just because they hate having the light while they're sleeping from the fire. So you can use a wall with a door in it so they can still get to the fire to put branches in it, but also a vent which will let the heat through but won't let the light through. Now at this point you really want to start thinking about how you want things to be for the winter, and one big part of that is putting storage inside. When it's winter, it's going to be snowing, it's going to go down to like -20 outside or even colder. You really don't want your characters to have to go outside for any reason. So I start putting storage of all the things that I'm going to need inside. So that means putting some hay stacks in, so you've got some hay or some oat sheaths in there ready to make more straw and to feed the animals and stuff like that. And then also put in storage for things like hides and rocks and anything else you think you might need. Try to find a space for it inside. Make extra buildings if you need to. All the time I keep on reevaluating how big the building needs to be, because it's quite easy just to make it a little bit bigger, just to expand things. Like here I wanted to make sure that I could fit an extra bed alongside the other ones, because I didn't want them walking over each other when they were waking up and stuff like that. You can also see I've got a load of branch storage next to the fire. It's not close enough to go on fire, I've got that blocking area around it, but it means that if they need to start the fire up again, like when it's a really cold night, they don't have to walk too far to go get a branch and then put it on the fire. Try to store as many branches as you possibly can. I normally set it, once you've got the timber thing where you can start cutting wood up, to about 1,000 branches. Before that, if you've just pulled down loads of trees, you'll have a load of branches anyway, but eventually you want to try and keep at that level of about 1,000 branches, because that'll last you for a long while when you don't really want to be going outside to cut down trees. Now I'm starting to really mine into the mountain in order to make more space for workshops. The heat is only venting into the bedroom, that's the only place I need the heat, but you can see there it's starting to get cold and it's saying it's an outside temperature, and that's because there's a hole in the roof just here where you can see the light getting through. So that means that I need to replace the roof there, and this happens because the mountain roof doesn't really expand very far away from walls sometimes, and so if you start seeing gaps, you really need to start plugging those as quickly as possible, otherwise it will get unbelievably cold. If you can sort all of this out in the summer and the autumn, it means you're not going to have people like dying from the cold or getting really grumpy because of it. So now it's the fall season and I can start seeing there's loads of mushrooms growing everywhere. I'd cut down a load of trees, and if you leave the tree stumps there, more mushrooms grow near them. So now you can just start harvesting as many mushrooms as possible. You can see at this point, this is the first night of fall, that I've only got 3 days of food, and that's mostly berries and eels and things like that. But now I'm starting to gather all of these mushrooms. If you look at the mushrooms and they look quite young, they're quite small, that means you'll only get like 1 mushroom from them when you harvest it. But if you get one where there's been a bunch of mushrooms there and they're fully grown, you could get 6 or even 9 at a time, which is obviously much better. Make sure you've got at least 5 mushroom drying racks, and then set them all to just keep drying, 60 mushrooms a day. That means they'll always be wanting more mushrooms, and as soon as your clan folk pick up mushrooms, they'll put them in there. So now you can see with my mushrooms being collected every now and then, I've already gone up to 10 days of food. That's enough to get you through an entire season, so 10 days is absolutely loads. You can build things like the meat smoker if you want, especially if you've unlocked fishing early. Like, smoking a load of fish isn't a bad idea, that's another way you can keep food, but if you've got enough mushrooms, you don't really need it. Now you can see where I've really started expanding. I've got the kiln going, I've got a load of iron because the mountain that I decided to make my base in already had a load of iron in it. So this means everything's being manufactured, everything's being made without me having to go outside. And that's really important. You want to be able to keep everything you build inside. You want everything to keep on working even when it's raining, especially things like your iron production, because you're going to end up needing nails for almost everything. So you want to make sure none of your smelters or smithies or forges or anything like that is outside. So once you've got everything else set up and you've got the kiln going and you've got nails and everything, you should be able to start making toilets. Now it's a good idea to try and make the toilets in a kind of separate room, because one of the things that will end up really bothering your clanfolk is when other people see them go to the toilet. So you can just make these tiny little rooms that are literally just big enough for a toilet. Make sure it doesn't get too cold, so you probably want a vent or something like that in there just to make sure that people can get in. And make sure you've got plenty of chamber pots, fertilizers, and one of those poop storage things. They're just like places where they put it in there. Make sure you've got some sacks as well, and that means that you'll constantly use wood ash that you're getting from the charcoal. Then you'll be using that to sort of empty the chamber pots into the fertilizer, make fertilizer with it that you can just sell to traders, to be honest. And then you'll have toilets all the time that people can use indoors. Another thing to work towards is building a well. So you want to build one of the stone crafting stations, so you can just look up on your ideas tree how you get to it. Then once you've built this thing, it's called the masonry, then you'll be able to start making blocks of stone, and with that you're going to be able to build a well. This is because once it gets to winter, all of the water will freeze, and that means that if you want any of your clan to get any water, they're going to have to start going outside, picking up some of the ice, bringing it inside, heating it up by the fire, and then using it. And all of that time wasted for every single thing that they need water for, including for the animals, for washing, and for drinking, is going to make people unhappy, is going to make people sicker, and all things like that. But if you build a well, the well never freezes. Now unfortunately you do have to build a well outside. It's one of the few things, the well and the clay pit are the two things I end up with outside, so I tried to build them as close to the door as possible. If you build them really close to the door, it means that your villagers aren't going to have that far to go and get water. And you can also start building a load of water jugs and places to keep the water jugs, so then they don't even need to go out to the well that often. So now you're pretty set up. Once you've got a fireplace, I'd make sure you've got that in the same room as your cooking fire that you're using to heat the bedroom. You'll have two fires now, and between those two, with a vent going through to the bedroom, you should be able to keep it around 15 degrees. Towards the end of fall, you'll start seeing the temperatures dropping. You might get your first bit of snow, and you'll also notice that everything's dying off. The trees are dying, the berry bushes aren't growing anymore. You might not see as many rabbits or anything like that, but you should be pretty self-sufficient. You can see in the bottom right here, I've got 38 days of food, which would take me all the way through winter and into spring just from all of those dried mushrooms. I've got 1,943 dried mushrooms. I've also got over 1,000 branches, so that'll be able to keep the fire going, and I've got loads of water, 1,138 water. You can see I've got all of those water jugs there, and across winter I actually end up adding more and more water jugs as I go. So once you've got to this point, once you're at the end of fall, you should have everything you need for the winter, and you shouldn't need to go outside ever again. You actually need to do some things like getting rid of the poop holes and things like that and the washing places. Make sure you've got enough baths and things like that, because if you don't, for some reason your clan folk will keep on insisting going outside and then complain that it's minus 20 degrees and they're freezing. When it's nighttime and it's cold, it's snowing outside, if one of the fires goes out for whatever reason, you can just click on one of the clan folk, wake them up, and then tell them to go to work. So you set them to overwork mode. That will mean that they wake up and they go start the fire up again, and then you can just turn it off again and they'll go straight back to bed. Normally them being cold will be like their first priority. If it's not, you can always set the priority of the fires just to make sure they go and fill those up as soon as possible. There's also a few other things you can do to keep them warm. You can open and close vents by clicking on them. There's an option to do that. You can also try and do things like putting the animals in the same place to sleep with the people when it gets really cold around winter 5. Just try to make sure that the temperature stays around 15 degrees. If it gets any hotter than like 25, that they'll complain, so that means you've probably got too many fires. And if it gets much colder than 10, then they'll start complaining as well. Now, as winter starts going on, you can see it's day 3 of winter here. I've got 37 days of food. I've got enough fire to keep everything warm. I just really started organizing everything again, trying to make sure that all of the rooms are as small as possible, because the bigger a room is, the harder it'll be to heat up. So anything that creates heat, like the kilns, like the cooking fires, like the smithies and forges and stuff like that, I put them in their own rooms just to try and capture a bit of that heat, which I can then use if I need to by moving vents around and stuff like that. It's also important to notice that water jugs will freeze if they're in a room that's not heated overnight. That's not the end of the world, you can just thaw them out again, but again that takes time. So I put the water jugs in somewhere where there is some sort of source of heat. The animals don't seem to care about it being freezing, like you can just keep them somewhere it's frozen, but you can bring them in with the people if you want to. Just spend this time looking around your base, trying to work out areas where people are going, where they're complaining about it being cold, areas where maybe it's too dark. Just give them some things to do, because they will kind of get bored if they don't have any jobs to do. Your task list will start shrinking. You can see mine's down to 30 there, because I don't really want them going outside and doing anything when they don't have to. Sometimes they'll go out to like make a window like that person was just there, but I don't really want them going outside when they don't need to. At some point, the elderly clanfolk will end up dying of old age. It's inevitable. They're only meant to last up until the winter, so no matter how healthy you keep them, they will end up dying. So Jeanette died of old age there. It's important to get the body out as quickly as possible, so I'd already dug a couple of gravestones for the old people. A little bit morbid, but you need to. And there's a corpse area where they'll drag the corpse to. Once you've dug the gravestone, I didn't work this out straight away. You have to click the gravestone and then choose who you want to be buried there, and then they'll get buried. But as long as the corpse is out of the way and no one can see it, because no one's going outside hopefully, it should be absolutely fine. Once everything else is settled, you can start doing things like trying to make sure that some of your clanfolk have a baby. All you need for that is an adult couple, and you need to keep their mood over 75%. They need to have a private room and a double bed. So all I did was make this little area down in the south of my base where there's some nicer scenery down there. There's some tiles and things like that. There's a double bed. I've kept it warm and I've stopped them from working, so that keeps them a little bit happier. That means eventually they'll have a baby, and then you can keep your clan going like that. You can also eventually end up building textiles and then build some clan colors, and sometimes people who work with you, people who you pay to work with you, they'll decide to join your clan, so you can expand your clan that way too. But that's really it. You can see here I'm at the very end of winter, turning into spring on day 31. I've got 30 days of food left, so I'd be able to get all the way to winter without doing any more food gathering if I wanted to, and everything's absolutely fine. If anything, you start struggling to find things to do, so you just end up making the next things on the tech tree. You can't go outside and do anything to do with crops, so you can't make bread or anything. You can't even go outside and start doing the flax stuff unless you want to go out and brave the cold in order to make linen, but that's all stuff that you can start doing in spring. It is worth remembering that just because it's spring doesn't mean you're immediately going to have loads of food available. The rabbits probably won't be about straight away, berry bushes will take a while to grow back, all of the grass and cereals and hay and things like that take a while to build. You can get access to water again, so that means you can get the eels, you can do fishing and stuff, but it's worth having some extra resources left over just to make sure you can survive the beginning of spring. Spring does also rain a lot, so if you've got farming supplies, like I would have loads and loads of oat seeds left over, you could start farming straight away, and because it's raining so much, the crops will grow really quickly, and you've probably got a load of fertilizer stored up because it's been winter. So I hope this guide has helped you. It took a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error to get to this point. If it has helped, please don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.